Well, before we get started, I'd just like to thank the Fuller team, Mike and Joe and Sparky, everybody here, Howie, Bubba, Phil, everybody. They're the best. They have been some of my best friends and some of my, if not my best customers for decades and decades. And it's just always a pleasure. It's been years since I've been down here with everything that's been going on in the world, and it's fun to finally get back out and get a chance to visit old friends and make some new ones, which is the most important part of it. So, all right, welcome to Fuller's Guitar. My name is Don Ruffatto. I'm with Gibson Acoustic Guitars. My wife always laughs at me because I'm Italian, so you will see me talking with my hands a lot. That's just kind of the nature of it. But I've been with Gibson Acoustic up in Bozeman for 28 years. A lot of changes, a lot of things happening. Talk a little bit about just as a company where we are today and how we got here. Of course, Gibson was in Kalamazoo, Michigan for decades and decades, starting in 1894. And in Michigan, they made everything: banjos, mandolins, arch tops, acoustic guitars, electric guitars. Went through some changes in middle part of the 1900s. Different ownerships came in. One of the things that was really a big changing time for Gibson was a company called Norland bought Gibson. And a lot of people compare it to, for those of you that are familiar with the motorcycles, when AMF bought Harley. It was the same sort of thing. They had no concept of what a good guitar is. All they saw was a bottom line thing that they saw that could make them money, but they didn't have any passion for it. And so they had their problems. The company started struggling, and they thought at that point in time also that, okay, Kalamazoo just really isn't a cool place if you're going to be in the rock and roll business. This was in the 70s. And so they decided to relocate the company to Nashville. One problem they really didn't think of. With electric guitars, it wasn't that big of a deal, but like the sides on our guitars average about 95 thousandths of an inch thick. Tops and backs are about 110 thousandths of an inch thick. If the wood isn't acclimated right, if the wood isn't dried to the right moisture contents, they just won't hold up. And what is Nashville? It's humid, and it can be humid for long periods of time. And even with today's technology, when it's 85, 90% outside for a couple months at a time, there's nothing you can do about it. And so they tried building some acoustic guitars, and they built some good guitars, but just weren't consistent enough to be profitable. During this time, two gentlemen, the company was having a lot of problems. Two gentlemen by the name of Henry Juskowitz and Dave Garrigan saw what was going on. They were both young Harvard grads and, guitar players. And so they said, well, we need to, this is an opportunity for us, because they saw the passion that people had for the Gibson guitars. And so they went and they bought everything that was Gibson and Epiphone, the factories, the woods, the inventories, the intellectual properties, the blueprints, everything, for $5 million. And people laughed at them because it was a product nobody wanted. But again, they saw what the old vintage guitars were going for, and people wanted them to pay thousands of dollars for a Les Paul, because the new ones just weren't cutting it. So they started turning things around, and they did a good job of that. But one of the things that they ran into was the same thing that Norland had. They tried building acoustic guitars in Nashville, and they just couldn't get the wood right. They couldn't make them consistent enough. So they kind of just, didn't really know what to do. There was a little mandolin factory up in Bozeman, Flatiron Mandolins, and in Bozeman, Belgrade area. And they started making mandolins that were pretty good. They looked an awful lot like the Gibson mandolin. So they said, well, they can't do that. So they said, well, we'll either get these guys to sell to us, or we'll put them in court for the next 10 years. And the owners of the mandolin factory couldn't afford to do that. So they sold Flatiron to Gibson. And the owners, in their infinite wisdom, said, if they can build mandolins like that up there, I bet they could do guitars. So they had the mandolin guys build a few acoustic guitars, liked what they saw, built a few more. And they said, okay, let's do this. So we broke ground on our factory in 1987, just outside on the outskirts of Bozeman. We shipped our first guitars out of Bozeman in 1989, and it was a rough first few years. We had old antiquated equipment that had been from Kalamazoo to Nashville to Bozeman. None of it was calibrated. We didn't have skilled builders, and we went through some really rough years in the first 4 or 5 years up there, just a constant rotation of managers and not enough funding, all the things that make a business a struggle. And in 1995, Henry, the owner and CEO, sent up his management team from the electric division, the custom shop, and good friends of both Mike Fuller and myself, and with the directive, fix it or shut it down. And 1995 was kind of the turning point for Gibson Acoustic, and in the years since then, it's just magical. The difference, the guitars, the quality of the guitars now. You know, I always kind of like to say that, you know, 95 was my first year at Gibson, and that's the reason for the turnaround. I think that was kind of just a coincidence. But the guitars are better, have been better and better, and I hear this from dealers like Mike, like all the independent dealers, the big boxes, everybody, you know, daily, that the guitars we're building now are the best guitars we've ever made. And we've done a lot of changes, we've done a lot of just making things better. We're not afraid to use technology, not to build guitars, but the technology out there now that you can monitor processes, check results, is phenomenal. And we are not afraid to do that. I mean, you gotta live and learn and get better every day. One of our builders made a statement once, he said, I don't care what you're building, whether it's car bumpers, ball bearings, or guitars, if you don't utilize the technology that's available, learn from your mistakes, and improve every day, you're not going to be in business very long. And we like to feel we're doing that right now. We're going to talk a little bit about how we build our guitars. I'm not going to say we build them to make them better than anybody else. We build them to be the best Gibsons we can make. There's a lot of great guitar manufacturers out there. I love all guitars. And different people build guitars in different ways, not so much to make them better, but just to get the sound and the type of guitar that they want to create for their customers. There are customers that do not like Gibsons. There are customers that do not like Taylors. There are customers that do not like Martins, and that's okay, because there's a guitar for everybody, but not every guitar is for everybody. We're going to do what we do and do it as historically accurate as we can in order to keep that mystique. I mean, we've had a lot of general managers that have come through over the years and said, well, why do we do this? You know, it takes a lot of time, it's expensive. And we go, that's what makes it Gibson. That's what makes it sound like it does. You know, again, do we make the best guitars in the world? No, we make best guitars we can make for the people that want that Gibson sound, that Gibson feel. And that's all we can do. And we really strive to do that. There's some things that we do when we build our guitars that we're not the only ones in the world that do it, but we're the only major manufacturer that still kind of sticks to these historic concepts on every guitar we make. The cool thing about the Gibson line is you go from our least expensive guitar to our most expensive guitar. The only differences are the cost of the materials, the amount of ornamentation, and the amount of time it takes to put that combination together. We do not change how we build a guitar because of our price point from a construction standpoint. I mean, we build our high-end stuff and our low-end stuff in the same lines, the same people to a point. If a guitar is a custom build, that Mike has a custom order for anybody that wants one, but it's a special build, or a really high-end guitar like this beautiful Hummingbird Custom Co. over here, only specific people at each stage work on those guitars. We have our custom shop builders, but they're working right beside the young builders, and that's how we teach people, that's how they learn. So we think that's actually a better way to do it than to have an isolated custom shop. People, you know, you got to train people, and the only way they can do it is to watch the experts. And so every day they're learning more and more, and eventually we'll become that guy. But a couple things we do that make us unique is there's kind of 4 concepts that we kind of live and die by. First off, you know, acoustic guitars generically, they're considered flat top guitars. That's what people call them. But our guitars, the tops are not flat. Our guitars have a 28-foot domed radius. And how we create that, it's not like an arch top where it's carved in. What we do is when we have the braces made or make the braces, the bottoms of the braces are actually made with that 28-foot radius. So when you put that top on, it bends the top over them. So the top is like this. Adds a ton of complexity to the build, but there's a reason why we do that. In a nutshell, the way an acoustic guitar creates tone is that every time you strike a note, it's microscopic, it happens in a millisecond, but that top deflects. It pushes that sound waves into the guitar where the different woods, the different body shapes, the different bracing patterns temper the tonality before it comes out of the sound hole. That's why different guitars sound different. when you have a true flat top guitar, and again, some builders love true flat top guitars, a lot of players like true flat top guitars, but in our opinion, there's no tension to that top, like there is when you stretch that over the braces. So when that top deflects, there's nothing to bring it back as quickly to its original position. We feel that with that tension in the top, every time you strike a note, even when you strum all 6 strings, every note is better defined, every note has more clarity, and it just gives it that distinctive Gibson sound that we like. Now you think about the complexity of that, and what does that entail? Well, you have your side of your guitar, you have your top, and you have a flat top, you can just glue it. If you have the side of your guitar, and this is like a magnified edge of the side of the guitar, you have a dome top that comes down, it's not going to hit parallel. So we have to have really specialized machinery that will take this edge and sand it at just the right angle. So when that curved top comes around, it hits it parallel. And it's microscopic, it's just minute changes, but it's necessary to make the guitar work and respond properly. So the dome top is just something that we feel again, we're not talking better, we're not talking worse, we're just talking what differentiates us from most manufacturers and what we do on every guitar. I'm just going to go ahead and pass this around. We'll talk a little bit about the bracing too, but you're going to kind of see that. Yes, sir.
What year did you guys start building with that dome top?
In the late 20s when we started making actual braced sound hole guitars. Before that, everything was like carved tops, arch tops, but the late 20s, L1s, that type of thing were when that came into being for us. Orville had a concept. He was gone long by then. He was gone after like 5 years. You know, by the early part of the century, the company had been bought by investors, and he was no longer part of it. But his thing that he brought to the table was that every part of the instrument should be something that is helping create tone. And we'll talk about some of those concepts, but there's no parts that are there without having a function. So everything is helping create. So the next thing that we talked about, got the dome top. And again, please feel free to ask questions at any time. One of the things that a lot of modern builders are doing and trying to find ways to create guitars more cost effectively, more time efficiently, is going to bolt on necks, bolting the necks to the body. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. There are major manufacturers that do that, and their playability is a lot of times impeccable, their consistency is impeccable, but there's a reason why we do not bolt the neck to the guitar. There's not much wood to the body of a guitar when you look at it. If you can take that neck and make it part of the instrument that's creating tone instead of just an attachment that holds the strings, that's what gives a traditionally built guitar that roundness of mid-range and roundness of tone that you often do not get from a non-traditionally built guitar. We still utilize a dovetail neck joint on every guitar we make, and then we take it one step further. We use, before there were wood glues, before there were super glues, there was something called the hide glue. That goes back to Stradivarius, and it's actually a horse hide that's dried and granulated, and then when you heat it up, it liquefies back up into a gooey mess, literally. But it transfers vibration better than any other kind of adhesive. I mean, and those of you that know guitars, when you play a traditional built guitar, whether it's a Gibson or another brand that has a dovetail neck joint, you strum a chord, you can feel that neck moving. You can feel that neck helping create sound. It's kind of like, when you hit a pitchfork, or a tuning fork, and you hit it and you can feel the handle moving in your fingers. Same sort of concept. It's just part of the instrument, not just an attachment. The dovetail neck joint is a double angled. You can see it tapers from top to bottom, but also tapers inward. So the farther you push it in, the tighter it gets, the better the connection is. And the hide glue transfers that vibration from the body through the neck. And the coolest thing about hide glue is, guitars they're fragile instruments over time. Those of you that have played guitars for a long time always heard about, guitars that need neck resets because just string tension pulling on wood eventually can have an effect. And the hide glue is really cool because what they do is they either pop out this fret right here above where the joint is, or they pop out this inlay, and you can inject steam in there 40, 50, 60 years later, and that glue will re-soften back up again, which won't happen with a normal, like a wood glue. And you can take the neck off. So it helps in that regard, too. And we hope our guitars never need a neck reset, but we're realistic. It's just, if the guitar is 60 years old, and you got 150, 180 pounds of string tension pulling up on that piece of wood for that long, sometimes things can happen. So the dovetail neck joint to us, it's a very time consuming thing. One thing a lot of people don't realize is putting the necks on the guitars is by far the most highest learning curve job in the entire factory. These guys have to, they put the neck on the guitar, and then they gotta look down and go, okay, it looks like this now, but what's gonna happen with full string tension? It's gonna move. But maple necks, not so much as mahogany necks. Long scale, a little bit more than short scale because of the added tension, so there's a lot of variables there. And again, it is the highest learning curve job in the factory, and another thing that comes into play is they put the neck on, and we don't know if it's actually done right until the guitar goes through the entire finish process, which is the most expensive part of the entire build. That's the first, after that it will see actual string tension and we'll know. So then they have to do it right a huge percentage of the time, or we're just not gonna be in business very long. So we have guys that train for a long time before they work on actual guitars, and that is the highest learning curve job in the factory, and they're very, very good at what they do. We did this series of like 10-minute films that's on YouTube right now. It's called The Process. The electrics for season 1, it's The Process season 2. So if you remember that, the one that just got released is about neck fit. And this is the 6th episode of 14, and then it just got released. So if you want to kind of see what I'm talking about in real life, you can just watch those videos. About one a month gets released. So it's very, very, very well done and very educational for those of you that are into that kind of thing. So you've got your dome top, you've got your nitro lacquer, you've got your dovetail neck joint with the hide glue. Another thing that modern builders have kind of gone to, and again, it's just we build things to get the end result that we want. Is it the best? That's arbitrary. We just like our sound. Have gone to UV poly finishes. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. It's quick, it's efficient, you spray the lacquer on, you put it under a UV light, and before long, it's hard as glass, looks great, durable. Never really gonna change much. It's not going to mature and as easily or as fast as a traditionally built guitar which is made with nitrocellulose lacquer. We still use nitro lacquer, which Gibson has always used on every guitar we make. For just a few minutes on UV, minimum of 5 days, just for the clear coat on all these guitars. Believe it or not, the clear coat is the most expensive and most time-consuming part of the entire building process. A lot of people don't realize that, but we just feel it's that important. The nitro lacquer for decades, it's releasing solvents, it's getting absorbed into the wood, it's getting thinner and thinner and thinner, and as that happens, that guitar is allowed to move. As it matures, we like to say it's like a fine bottle of wine. It just definitely gets better with time. And as that lacquer gets thinner, loosens up, the wood moves more, the sound created is just more dynamic, and there's a reason why those vintage guitars, by all traditional makers, are as valuable as they are and sound as good as they do. It's not just because they're old, it's because they're made in a way that they can get better and better with time. So those three concepts, the dome top, the dovetail neck joint, and the nitro lacquer, are the three things that, again, apply to every Gibson acoustic guitar. But most importantly is, we do, at Gibson Acoustic Guitar, of all major manufacturers, we do more handwork on every guitar than any other manufacturer. Now, I shouldn't say every guitar, because like Martin makes a ton of very, very, very wonderful traditional guitars, but it doesn't cross over their whole line. Whereas with us, every guitar we make, every piece of wood is hand sanded, every neck is hand sanded to final shape, every top, back, and side is hand sanded to final thickness. You take 3 hummingbirds, for example, put them side by side, everyone's going to feel, sound, and play a little differently. And we love that. I mean, you find a guitar that you love, it's the only guitar like that in the whole world. Others may look just like it, but it just makes every guitar unique. And again, you put 4 hummingbirds in a row, you might like the first one, you might like the second one, you might like the third one best, for various reasons, just individual taste, individual style of play. And we just feel that having that individuality in the guitars is an important part of what we do, and something that we're really proud of. Our builders just do a great job of, within parameters, keeping things as consistent as we can, but still each guitar will have its own personality. So building the guitars, we talk about how we build them historically. Well, one of the things we've learned over the years is the technology that's out there, you got to utilize it. And for example, we get in a bunch of wood, we get in a bunch of mahogany. We got it from the from the supplier. He says, well, it's been kiln dried. We get it in, we put it on the shelves, and we shelf all of our wood for 30 days, even if it comes in kiln dry, just to acclimate it to our climate. We build a guitar out of it, but we never really knew. But now the technology is so cool. We have something that looks like a cell phone. And say you want to check mahogany. You actually punch in the specific gravity of mahogany, put it on there, and it's like sends a signal through the wood, and it tells us this is at 4% moisture, 5% moisture. So we can take like a pallet of wood and spot check half a dozen pieces in there and make sure it's right, whereas it used to be kind of just a guess. And our attrition rate, our efficiency, have gone through the roof. Our off-fall has dropped basically to nothing. And so again, it doesn't affect the hand building of the guitar, but just utilizes the tools available to us to make better guitars. Another thing too is, okay, we talked about the lacquer. The lacquer thickness has to be consistent, and that was always a really hard thing to monitor. You got a guy that's spraying, and he's supposed to put on, say, 7 coats. It's Friday, 6:30. We're already worked overtime. His shoulder's killing him from spraying all week. His wife's mad because he's working late again. And he's got 5 of the 7 coats on. He goes, who's going to know? Who's going to know? You know, and so he doesn't put on the last 2 coats. But then the guitars get into the buffing room, and they're buffing through the lacquer because it's too thin. And then it creates rework, creates more time, more money. Or the flip side of that, you got the guy that's tired of those buffers buffing through his lacquer. So I'll show them. He puts it on super thick, and then the guitar doesn't sound good because it's like encased in this heavy coat of lacquer. So they have a cool tool now that, again, looks kind of like a cell phone, and it's like a little sonar. It sends a signal through the lacquer to the wood and back, and we can tell to 1/1000th of an inch how thick the lacquer is on that instrument. So we spot check every guitar just to make sure that if it has too much lacquer, we strip it and do it over. If it's not enough, we send it back through for the right amount of coats to get it to where it needs to be. And just the consistency is so much better, again, utilizing that kind of technology. Now, does anyone here know what a plec machine is? Few people, great. So those of you that do not, it's technology that's been around for the last 20 or so years, where you take a finished guitar and you put it in this fixture before it has strings on it, and it simulates string tension and gets the neck in the same position it will be in once the guitar is tuned up to pitch. Then you put it in this other machine, and it senses the width of the nut and the width of the fingerboard down here, so it knows where all 6 strings are going to eventually lie. Then it has a sensor that bounces over every fret underneath where every string is going to be, and it can tell if this fret is 1/1000th of an inch higher than this one, 1/1000th of an inch lower, and it goes in and adjusts just the frets that need to be adjusted. So that way you get the perfect playing surface. It recrowns them, polishes them, does it all on a computer, basically. And for us that's really important, because historically we would build a guitar, we would send it to a Fuller's guitar store or another Jim's Guitar in Tustin, California, and we would send the guitar to the store. They'd take it out of the box, they'd look at it, they'd adjust it if needed, adjust the truss rod, make sure it was right before they hung it on the wall. But so much business these days is done in a manner where we build a guitar, set it up, get it right, put it in a box, send it to a warehouse. Someone gets online, orders that guitar, and that box goes straight in the warehouse to the customer. We don't have that buffer. We don't have anyone that touches the guitar between the factory and the person that hopes to pick it up and play it that day. So we really had to up our game on how the guitars came out of the factory, the playability, and the plec machines really just were a game changer for us in making that happen without having to spend multiple hours, which means more expensive guitars. And we plec every guitar that we make. And we started that in 2014. But we actually started plecking, but we didn't tell anybody really about it for a while, because the last thing we wanted was someone coming into Mike's store or any store and go, well, I want one of those, but I want one of the new ones, because this one wasn't plecked. So we kind of let the market kind of wash out the old product before we let people know that we were plecking, which I thought was a really good way to do it. And that way people it was a good transition for us, but the end result was just fantastic. So anyway, that's kind of the nature of how we build the guitars and why we do what we do. People always ask, well, why can you not build a $600 guitar? I want to buy a guitar for my boy to learn on. We don't want to change how we build to get to that price point. And we do have Epiphone. They are an import brand. They're owned by Gibson. The quality control is controlled by Gibson. They build wonderful instruments, and it's nice to have that differentiation. If it says Gibson on the peg head, it is made in the United States. There's no offshore factories doing lower priced Gibsons. You know, if it says Epiphone, it's a great guitar, but that is indeed, you know, we do make a couple models, I should say, that are US-made Epiphones, but there are no non-USA made Gibsons out there. It's something we really had on. And we went through an ownership change about 6 years ago. The ownership that bought the company from Norland ran into some problems. The guitars always made money, but they would take that guitar money and spend it on these other odd things that never really worked. And the death knell was kind of when Gibson bought Philips Electronics. Think of that, big company, worth probably 20 times what Gibson was worth. And the ownership ended up incredibly deep in debt. And there was a gentleman by the name of Cesar, passionate guitar guy from Argentina, part of an equity bank called KKR, one of the largest private equity banks in the world. And it's so funny when you think of bankers, I always think of guys with gray hair and gray suits sitting around in an office. And the guys that run KKR, they're all like in their 40s, early 50s, they're all guitar players. And so when Cesar went to them and said, hey, you know, people are passionate about this product, but these guys that own it now are just, this company's gonna go away. Or some overseas entity's gonna buy it. We need to keep this an American company. And they came in and they ousted the old ownership, took it over, and it's just been a totally different world. We just doubled the size of our acoustic factory, spending tens of millions of dollars. They're not afraid to reinvest. They're upping the game with our employees. Our retention rate is better. The benefits are better. Everything about the company is better than it was 6 years ago. And I think people see it in the quality of the product. I see it in the attitudes of the builders, which again translates into the quality of the product in the long run. So it's a really great time at Gibson. You know, just to give you an idea of where we're at with the acoustics, you know, we're building about 125 or so a day, give or take, and we literally have about 20,000 guitars on order. So I mean, do the math. People they're just dying to get our stuff, and sell through is great at the retail and internationally. Our business is strong. China, Japan, Europe are all just begging for more and more product all the time. So it's a good time for us, and a lot of that has to do with the transition to Cesar and his team and the new ownership. And I'm really happy. They moved me from working for the acoustic side of things strictly. So I still work strictly with acoustic, but now I'm product development manager from a corporate standpoint. So it's fun. Opened my eyes to a lot of things from a business standpoint, why we do things, and they're just really, really, really smart in running the business the way it needs to be run. So I think it's good things, nothing but good things ahead for Gibson. Any questions on the construction and, what did I do? Did I turn that up or down? That's okay, close enough. Any questions on, yes, go ahead.
Well, sort of a statement and then a sort of rhetorical. The statement is, thank God the new ownership got back to being a guitar company instead of a tech company that also builds guitars.
Thank you, yes, sir.
And the other thing I have to say is for the very small minority of low-enders down here, please turn some attention to acoustic-based guitars.
You know, we get requests to delve away from what we do on a daily basis, like tenor guitars, acoustic basses, that kind of thing. Our capacity is always an issue, just because of the sheer amount of acoustic guitars that we have right now on order. But it's another thing too, is to do something like an acoustic bass or a tenor guitar that's out of the realm of this. A lot of tooling, a lot of revamping of the factory for, I'm just going to say it, a very small segment of the market. So it's a justification thing. It's not that it's not a good idea. Sometimes it's just not right for us at the given time.
I understand.
Yeah, so thank you for the question. Talk a little bit about the instruments themselves. We started building the flat top style guitars that you see today. You know, from 1894 through the mid-20s, Gibson made a lot of different types of instruments. Most of them were carved tops. They did a lot of wacky things like the harp guitars and all that kind of stuff that you've seen. But in the late 20s, they started building guitars as we know them today. Started off with small body guitars. This is just an example of it. Pretty much all the guitars were like this size from the 20s, you know, late 20s through the 30s, through the mid 30s. L00s, L1s, that type of thing. That's just the style that Gibson made at that point. There really wasn't demand for anything else. But in 1934, Gibson created what they called the Jumbo. At that time, it was a huge guitar. You know, now it's a standard size what we call slope-shouldered dreadnought. But the 34 Jumbo, which this is a replica of, was kind of breaking for the guitar industry. I mean, this particular one is very deep. You can see it's deeper all the way up to where normally it tapers to be thinner up here. But it's just a dynamic instrument that just kind of took the world by surprise, and so Gibson expanded on the concept. 1936, we created the Advanced Jumbo, which was a rosewood long scale version of that same body profile. A little bit thinner body, rosewood, neck wasn't quite as big, and just some really cool detailings. And some of the most valuable acoustic guitars are the original Advanced Jumbos that you can find out there from the 30s. This is a replica of a 1936 Advanced Jumbo, and wonderful guitar. Now, long scale versus short scale. Just going to go briefly. A lot of people, you've heard those phrases before, but a lot of people don't realize what that dynamic changes and what it does. The general physics of long scale versus short scale. You take a string of any given diameter, and the longer it is, the tighter you have to stretch it to get it up to a specific pitch. So a long scale guitar, it's 25, let's say 25 and a half inches versus 24 and 3/4 inches. On the longer scale guitars, you have to add more tension to get them to pitch. Now, what does that do? Downside, it's going to play a little tighter, it's going to play a little stiffer. Upside is you can drive it harder. That's why the bluegrass players love those long scale Martin guitars. They're all 25 and a half, just generally speaking. They use the heavy picks, they drive it hard, they got to keep up with those damn banjos. And you know, but then you get the short scale guitars respond to a lighter touch. You can finger pick on them easier. They're just easier to play for like someone that hasn't played a lot. They just play a little with a lighter touch. So there's pluses and minuses, but you can't drive a short scale, generally speaking, as hard as you can a long scale, because the strings will oscillate, they'll flap, they'll buzz a little bit. So it's just a personal preference on your style of playing, the sound you want to get. So that's the basic difference between long and short scale, if you've ever wondered that. So moved on to the late 20s, or excuse me, the late 30s, and there was a cowboy by the name of Ray Whitley, who was kind of jealous of like the Gene Autry's of the world, because they had their Martin guitars with their name on them and their guitars. And so Ray Whitley, who was really famous in the day, probably almost as famous as Gene Autry, Roy Rogers, those guys, came to Gibson and he said, I need a big guitar. This is, of course, all conjecture how the conversation went, but it was kind of like, we have one microphone on stage, you got singers over here, a band over here, no one can hear this little guitar that I have. I need you to make me a big guitar. So the electric, at that point it was all in one factory in Kalamazoo. They had these body molds for like Super 400s and you know, that type of guitar. So they actually utilized that and made him a guitar like this. It was called the Western, we call it the Western Classic. Ray Whitley Western Classic was the original, but out of that became the J200, which is just it's you know, probably the most iconic, this and the Hummingbird, visibly the most iconic acoustic guitars ever. And people just went nuts. They said, wow, I've never seen a guitar that big before, but it's just like magic, totally. Sorry, I gotta get comfortable here. I mean, there's a lot of air moving there with this big body. It just sounds fantastic. The maple, of course, gives it a little crisper tonality, but the size of the body just moves so much air that it just rounds it out. And 200s have been, since the late 30s, made basically dimensionally and structurally unchanged. You know, if it's not broken, they'll fix it. So that takes us into the early 40s. In 1942, Gibson created a new instrument, the J45. This is the guitar that has been our biggest selling guitar every year since 1942. And even today, it's even all the electrics and everything, it is the single biggest selling guitar for Gibson. Single biggest selling model for Gibson guitar, and still is to this day. And it just works. I mean, it's short scale, comfortable to play, the mahogany is really balanced. You know, to me, people ask me about the difference in tone woods, and a lot of different tone woods are used, but historically, the big three, of course, are rosewood, maple, or mahogany for back and sides. almost all acoustic guitars have spruce tops, either Sitka or Adirondack, but the backs and sides kind of temper that tonality. Rosewood will give you a little bit more low mids, a little bit more roundness, a little deeper tonality. Maple's going to be a little crisper right up front, kind of brassy, kind of brash. But mahogany is just right down the middle. It's the most balanced tone wood. The J45, and this is something that we can't quantify, but we really do believe that this is the most recorded guitar in music history. Country, rock, Americana, every genre of music just loves J45s. And the balance is so good through the lows, mids, and highs that it works great in the studio, great on stage. I mean, like the comparison to this would be like a Martin D18. Same woods and the same results. That's why they're so popular in their respective brands. That's their biggest selling guitar. This is ours, and mahogany is just a wonderful, balanced, user-friendly tone wood, and thus the J45 has just been wonderful for us for all those years, 75 years as of last year, or 70 years. Excuse me. So J45, we go through the rest of the 40s into the 50s. 1952, we created a guitar called the J185. For a lot of people, the J200 was just too big. It just wasn't comfortable to sit and play. So we created a guitar that was 1 inch smaller, across the lower bout. Just had some cool dynamics, to it with the parallelograms and Maltese crosses on the bridge. And it's been a staple for us, since 1962. Works really well, very balanced guitar, and much more comfortable to play for a smaller person than a J200. 1962 comes around, and it's getting to be into the folk era, and Gibson wanted to do something fun. So, thus the creation of the Hummingbird. A lot of people said, well, that's kind of strange, red guitar with birds and flowers on it, that'll never work. 60-some years later, 70 years later, it's still here, and we still sell, other than the J45, we sell more of these than anything else. Again, the mahogany just works well. Now, this is what we call a square shoulder dreadnought versus the slope shoulder of the J45 type body. Not better, not worse, just a different tonality. And this is, I'll just say it, this is kind of a little bit more of a Martini style body from a dimensional standpoint. And it just works really well for us. And the Hummingbird is just the birds and the flowers and the pickguards, it's just iconic. 1962, the Dove happened to be. You see some Doves over here on the wall. Basically maple, long scale versions of a Hummingbird. A lot of people always say, well, what's the difference other than the cosmetics of the pickguard? But there are some things. Traditional Doves, indeed, are maples, they're going to be a little brighter. Traditional Doves are long scale, so they're going to allow. I always make the analogy, it's like the Hummingbird was made for that folky guy that's going to pick short scale, mahogany, do that kind of thing, and the Dove was made for that cowboy. Long scale, maple, you're going to drive it. And so that people kind of get that. That's the basic difference between those two models. A few cosmetic things, but generally speaking, that was the purpose of the two. So after the mid-60s, not a whole lot happened. Gibson was going through its transition from Martin to Taylor, from Norland to to our new ownership, and little foobar there, but that's okay. And so we just kind of lived on it, and in the early 90s, after we got to Montana, it took us a while to get our feet wet. We went through some general managers, going through some changes, and Martin was going through some things at the same time, and that's when a company called Taylor Guitars really jumped in. And Bob Taylor came out with some incredible new ways to build guitars, incredible ways to make guitars in a very cost-effective and incredibly accurate and consistent fashion that the industry had not seen before. And his styles were new. The younger players specifically just loved his stuff for all the obvious reasons. They were great. A lot of the younger players thought, like Gibson and Martin, that's kind of like my grandpa's guitar. I love this new Taylor thing, it's cool. And it worked wonderfully. And we felt it, our other competition felt it. So we went kind of back to the drawing board, and we came up with a new model for the first time since the 60s. Called the Songwriter. It's not a true traditional square shoulder, not a true traditional round shoulder, kind of a modified, just a little sexier Gibson, so to speak. And it worked really well. We went through some various changes in naming and styles and configurations of woods, but We actually sold one of these this morning, right here at the store. My go-to guitar is a Songwriter from 1997, one of the early ones. They just work well. They're rosewood, so they have the warmth and richness of rosewood. They're long scale, so they drive the way a guitar should and can. And it's just a modern version of a Gibson. One of the things, just not to get too in the weeds here, but we have our bracing pattern that we use. Where's that top at? Is it around somewhere? Our bracing pattern that we use has been very consistent over the decades. And thanks, Scott. You bet. And the angles are important. The X brace is the most important part of the bracing. The other tone bars, of course, also play an intricate part, but the X brace is the key. Now, we have angles that we've used. One thing we look back, and that AJ from 1936, they did something on that guitar where they took this X brace, and I'm going to use the international symbol for bracing, which is this. And they took that, and what they did is they opened it up 5 degrees on that AJ. And what it did is just it opened up this lower bout, allowed it to be more dynamic, to move more. And we went back and said, wow, that's kind of cool. So when we made the Songwriter series, we put that advanced bracing in there. And it really, really makes a difference. Not better, not worse, just different. Now, Martin, of course, those of you that are familiar with Martins, they do a lot of what they call forward shifted bracing. They go for the same concept of opening up the lower bout. What they do is they take their braces and they just move them up, away from the lower bout, closer to the sound hole. Same concept, we're still trying to get the same thing, we just do it in a different direction. So a fair number of our guitars have the advanced bracing, not all of them, because there's something to be said for like a Hummingbird or a 45 when you hit it and you hit it harder and harder and it kind of compresses, kind of like my boss says, it kind of starts barking at you a little bit. And that's just a cool thing. Whereas the advanced bracing will stay cleaner at a little higher volume, and that's why the bluegrassers love that guitar. They love the forward shifted Martins. And for those of you that are into speakers, I always make the comparison like some people like 12s. You can play them really loud and they stay clean. Some people like 10s because they break up and they compress at a lower volume. Same sort of concept. So that the advanced jumbo had like we call it the secret weapon of that advanced bracing in it from the 30s. So that was kind of the last new model, new body style that we've done. Of course, you can see we've done variations on a lot of different things. But a few years ago, when the new ownership came in, they said the line is too confusing. We're going to break it down into 3 categories. Number 1, we're going to do our modern series, modern collection. We're going to take our historic guitars and make the best modern versions of those that we can. So here's an example over here with this LAA. Historic guitar from the 30s, 20s. In this case, what we did is went, okay, what can we do to make this just the best modern version of this guitar without getting into the structural or tonal part of it? Okay, well, some people say, well, your guitars aren't that inexpensive, but they have some of the historic stuff, they have those plastic tuner knobs. Some people don't understand that the tuners they're great tuners, but that's the way they were back in the day. But on the modern guitars, we use Grovers, just to kind of give people that, because this is industry standard tuners, and to some people's eyes, they are a little bit more substantial. Do they work any better? I'm not going to say yes, I'm not going to say no, because I don't want to disrespect Grover either. But, we put Grover tuners on them. We upgraded things like the inlays from like decals and silk screens to mother of pearl. We put pickups in them, just to make them, again, the best versions of historic guitars that we can make in a modern fashion. So we have our modern collection. Put this back up here. Then we said, okay, well, there's people out there that like the old stuff but don't really want to pay for like a period correct, accurate representation or buy a real one. So we went with what we call our original category, which is basically a modern build internally, structurally, but just has some of the throwback details from an era. It's not year specific. It has like the original logos. It has the original style tuners. You can see the binding has what we call an antiquing on it. We darken it up to give it a little bit of a patina, make it look like an older guitar. We still put pickups in them, because most of them anyway, because that way people, if they're plug and play ready, can use them. Again, just a throwback without going all the way to a historic, accurate replica piece. Final category is, of course, our custom shop. two categories of custom shop. Custom shop modern collection, which where we took our iconic guitars and just turned them into something incredible. This is a Hummingbird Custom Koa, and I'm not really going to pass this around because Mike could kill me if I did that. But when you look at this guitar, and I want you to come up and look at it when we're done here, every bit of detailing on the shell, on the pickguard, on the bridge is hand engraved. Every one of these is different. It's hours and hours and hours of engraving on the inlays. Even the tuner knobs are hand tooled and then gold plated on this guitar. So we have our custom shop moderns. Then we went a little step farther and said, okay, there's a few guitars that kind of got us to where we are today. Let's pick out some models and make really, really period accurate representations of those models. So we started with the 1942 J45, the 36 Jumbo, the 1939 J55, and people just loved it. People know what torrefied woods are, some people. What they did is they wondered, why do those old guitars sound the way they do? Why do they have that dynamic? Well, over the past couple decades, the technology came around where they could actually explore old pieces of wood and find out what makes them different than a new piece of wood. And they discovered the cell walls were collapsed, the sugars were crystallized, and they said, okay, that's cool. Now we know why they sound good. How can we replicate that? And they came up with the process called torrefication. Now there's a few different ways to get there. We call it thermal aging just because we want to be different. But the way we do it is we take the top wood, the Sitka spruce or Adirondack spruce, and it goes into a 500-degree kiln. But what happens when you put wood in 500 degrees? It starts on fire. So it has to be a vacuum kiln because there can be no oxygen at all in there, otherwise that wood will combust. So it's an expensive process, but it just turns the wood into this crystallized, you tap it, it's like a piece of glass. And of course it makes it a little stiffer, harder to work with, but the end result on the historic guitars is just magical. So that over the last 3 or 4 years, this historic lineup has just killed it for us. We wanted to go one step further, which is why we're here today to talk about it. The custom shop electric side down in Nashville for the past fair number of years has just done incredibly well with something called Murphy Lab. Now Tom Murphy is a guy that for years has perfected the process of making a new guitar look old. And he's just done an incredible job of making it actually look like an old guitar with looking contrived, without looking like, you can take like I keep saying, you can take a quarter and scratch the top of the guitar. It doesn't make it look like a real vintage guitar. So he's really good at doing the subtle little things that make the guitars look like a real 1959 Les Paul. So we said, wow, well the custom shop's doing so well with that. We decided to open our own Murphy Lab in Bozeman, Montana. And we worked very closely with Tom Murphy and with the team from Nashville. And we developed the Murphy Lab Gibson Acoustic Guitars. One of the things that we talked about the nitro lacquer. Now the nitro lacquer will always check. We've always told people this lacquer is going to check. But then you get, that customer that buys that guitar, spends a lot of money, and 2 years later the guitar checks. They're upset, they're not happy. And so over the years we had our lacquer manufacturer modify our lacquer formulas to have just a little bit of plasticizer in it. So that way, as the guitar changed with winter to summer, dry to moist, and the guitars move and swell and shrink, the lacquer would give with it just a little bit. But when we did the Murphy guitars, we wanted them to be as close to the old guitars as possible. So we actually went back to our lacquer manufacturer and said, make it like it used to be. And so they made us this really, like it used to be, really stiff, really crystallized lacquer. And so what we do on these, and I know it's hard to see from the back, if you get a chance, come up and look at some of these. Anything that has like the pick wear and the cracking, those are new Murphy Lab guitars, so you can identify them from the others on the wall. But what they do is they spray a thin coat of the Murphy Lab lacquer on, then they put the guitar in a freezer for about an hour. And when it comes out, it has the checking just like a guitar that's been under the bed for 40 years, under the bed for 50 years. And with that lacquer, the guitar is so light and so responsive. But the other details that they go to make these guitars like an old guitar is just fascinating. Like, you play guitar for a few years, this area right here is going to get softened up, that edge. You play a guitar, these edges are going to get softened up. A lot of people rub the bridge right here, so those corners are going to get dulled down a little bit. On the top, not so much on the bottom. you know, the corners of the peg head are always the first thing to go. You know, that's the first part that gets dinged and knocked off. We do just on these, we're just doing what's called light aging. Not a lot of heavy, really beat up, but just like it was played and then put away. And again, the detail, the way they do it is so natural and so good that it's just, you know, not a lot of huge buckle rash or anything, but just some natural dings and dents that would happen over time. Tarnishing the hardware. Even the paints and aniline dyes they use to get the colorations, like on the Hummingbird and even on the vintage Sunburst ones, are totally different than we use on our regular production guitars. So it's a very, very incredibly time-consuming process. I mean, just the building of the guitars themselves is harder because you try to make them as historically accurate as possible. But then you get to the point where you get this finish going, and the lacquer is so thin and so responsive. Can't beat that. They really work well. I think they're the best sounding 45s we've ever made. And it's just that we're hearing that from so many people. Again, when you get a chance to come up afterwards, feel the weight on these. They just feel like an old, dried out guitar. They're just wonderful. Now we're making 5 models of the Murphy Lab guitars going back to 1933 with the wonderful El-Double-O. It's called the El-Double-O Tuxedo. And we had a good friend that actually purchased this guitar, but was nice enough to bring it back in today, so we'd have it to show you. We have a full set here, and thank you very much. And it's just a really, really, really cool representation of the oldest Gibsons. And it's got, back in the day, they were transitioning from guitars that didn't have truss rods. Anyone here not know what a truss rod is before I go any further? Okay, you know, truss rod is basically a piece of metal, so over time the string tension is going to want to take that neck and do this, and the truss rod just helps adjust it back on flat. I'm not going to get into that too deep since everyone here probably knows that. But a lot of guitars did and didn't have truss rods necessarily in Gibson's time, so a lot of the guitars had really big necks in case it was a model that didn't have a truss rod, so the neck would support the string tension. So this is kind of a throwback to that. It has a really, really nice V, which gives it a big sturdy backbone, so to speak. And you wrap your hand around that, you'll appreciate that feel. But the El-Double-O is just really cool. Again, it's a silk screen on the peg head, which is something we don't do a lot of. The white pickguard was very iconic from that time. And just a wonderful guitar. I was telling some folks earlier, we made our first Murphy Lab guitars, and they look great. The aging, the lacquer and everything. We looked inside and go, wait a minute, that looks like freshly cut wood in there. So we didn't think about that, because that's something the electrics never had to think about. So we went in, and Madison, our Murphy Lab director, he uses a lot of dirt. He'll rub dirt inside the guitar and then clean it out, and just to make it look like so it's not so fresh and clean in there. So again, just every detail was thought through. El-Double-O, great guitar. The J45, which you saw a bit ago. The Hummingbird, very iconic again, and this is the Murphy Lab version. Now even the pickguards on these, we found the original pickguard molds from Kalamazoo. And he found a formulation of materials that they used back then. We had to get modern versions of that, but he actually hand pours these pickguards in the Murphy Lab. He'll pour the basic color, and then he'll take a darker color and drop it in, take a toothpick and swirl it. So it's kind of just gives it that kind of mottled look, and every one is different, and every one is handmade. But these Hummingbirds are, again, just I hope you guys get a chance to come up and try these out when we're done. If you take the time to do that, they're just wonderful sounding guitars. And then come up and take a look at the detailing of the aging. You can't really see the checking from the back, but it's very, very authentic. It's very cool. It looks like a guitar you would see in a pawn shop and wish you could buy in a pawn shop. We have the 1942 Banner Rosewood Southern Jumbo, which is, again, the Southern Jumbo and the 45 are basically the same body shapes, just a little bit different cosmetics. The inlays, the binding package, but this being a Rosewood version gives it a little bit different tonality. More rounded mid-range than you'll get. Not quite the balance you get on the 45, but very warm, very rich. This guitar was actually purchased this morning as well. The gentleman was nice enough to leave it here, so we'd have it to show you guys today, and I appreciate that. And of course, the big boy, the SJ200. Same sort of thing with the pickguard on this, handmade in our Murphy Lab in Montana, and just an incredible example of our Super Jumbo. So cool, it has that nice round low end because of the size of the body, but the maple gives it that high-end crispness, so it's just a wonderful combination. Hard to beat that. So, the 5 Murphy Lab guitars, they're new, they just were released last month. You know, we are already just, the sell-through and replenishment orders have just been killing us. And we had seen a lot of hopes for that for the long term, and we're just gonna keep doing it and offer more models in the Murphy Lab. Eventually, we'll be starting to offer what we call made to measure, which is people can create their own guitars to a point within what we can do, and be able to offer that with Murphy Lab treatment on it. So that's coming down the road. Any questions? Anybody? Yes, sir.
Do you make any 12-fret guitars?
We do, as a matter of fact, as of Tuesday, this coming Tuesday, no, excuse me, last Tuesday, the 3rd, we released an LOO 12-fret rosewood. Wonderful fingerstyle guitar, you know, just comfortable parlor guitar. I love 12-fret guitars. I'm not a big guy. And what he means by 12-fret is normally the body joins the neck at the 14th fret. On a 12th fret, it joins it at this fret, which means everything's kind of shifted down. For me, I love them because everything's right here. You know, it's just, some people don't like it because they like to have that access above those frets and be able to get up there, but I like it because it makes it more comfortable to play. And
Are you going to be slotted or not?
no, not slotted. We're not doing any slotted. So it's such totally different tooling to do a slotted peg head. But you know, one of the things that happens, we talked about just briefly. I want to get again not too far into the weeds, but how the top moves when you play. It's like a speaker column. It moves most right in the middle of that. When you take that bridge and move it down here on the 12th fret, it actually kind of centers it better. It actually centers it in the middle of that speaker column, of that dome. Some people say that that's a cool dynamic that the 14th fret can't get, but at the same time, a lot of people like to have those upper frets available to them. So it's just a personal preference thing. And yes, we are going to do the 12th fret LOO.
Would it make a difference in some of the more older style guitars that you replicated, like the parlor size? Would it make it louder with 12 fret?
Possibly. I mean, we've done some.
The tonality that much.
Yeah.
And the volume.
But it's for us again. You know, I have we made an L1 20 years ago. That was a 12 fret, the Robert Johnson L1, and I have one of those from back in the day, and I love that guitar. I play it. That's my couch guitar, and it's great. You know, but it's just it's not better or worse. It's just different. You know, just a different dynamic. But again, sometimes I wish I could get to those upper frets that I can't reach with the 12 fret. So there's a trade-off there. Yes, sir.
Is the tarification done before the build or after?
Before the build.
So is there any, that's the first question is that, the second is there any concern about the torfication and then the 28 degree bend?
We have not had any issues with that.
Okay, that's
Now here's the sidebar to that. We decided to try to build just one guitar, and we actually built a few more, but the first one we built with a fully torrified body. Ribs, or thermally aged, and I use Gibson vocabulary here. Thermally aged body with tops, you know, backs and sides also thermally aged. So we sent out a mahogany set of the sides and the back, had them thermally aged, brought it back. We took those side sets, what we call the ribs, we put them in the rib press to bend them, hit the button, shattered into 1,000 pieces. That's what it does to the wood. It just makes it so much crisper, so much more crystallized. So we went, so we pre-bent a set of ribs, sent it out, had it thermally aged, brought it back. And that guitar, in my opinion, is the best sounding J45 we've ever made. It is in my basement. Just saying. But we did make a run of fully torrified 1942s for Mike, for Fuller.
Yes.
How many did you get? About a dozen?
20.
20 of them. And he was the only one in the world that's ever had fully torrified Gibson Acoustics, fully thermally aged Gibson Acoustics sell to this point. We will get back to that.
Which model?
It was a J45 for 1942 banner. Yes.
How long, you said you try to make 125 guitars a day. Approximately how long does it take to build a guitar, start to finish?
Start to finish, an average production guitar, we're gonna take the Murphy Labs out, because they take longer, we're gonna take the Hummingbird Custom Coas out, but a J45 modern or original, Hummingbird modern original, it's approximately 13 to 14 working days from start to finish. And of course, the bulk of that time is waiting for paint to dry, waiting for glue to dry, waiting for lacquer to dry. I mean, we actually had this, you're all familiar with like what the Make-A-Wish Foundation is, kind of thing. Well, there's this similar organization out of Florida that had this young boy that was having health issues, and they wanted to bring him up to Montana. He wanted to come up and see how a guitar was built. And so I set up this thing where he came up, and I had everything just laid out perfectly, where in the first day, he got to help cut out the top. Then he got to go watch the top being braced and help place the braces. And then while that was drying, I took him over the neckline, and he got to watch him cut out the cavities. He got to set his own inlays in and watch him do the frets. And literally in a day and a half, we had that guitar in the spray booth. But he got to do like probably either see or help with probably 80% of the processes on his guitar that they ended up buying for him. It was a really, really cool thing to do, and it was fun. And I still communicate with his mom and him on a regular basis, and it's you can do things quicker, but there's no reason to. You want to make sure it's done right. So it's 13 to 15 working days from start to finish, and that includes the rest period for the lacquer. The lacquer has to sit for at least 3 days after you spray it on before you buff it. The nitro is so active that if you don't wait that long when you buff it, it will do what we call orange peel back up. It will, it just won't stay flat. So that's the average time. So our new facility is incredible. The guitars in the old factory, they're built to where they are just what we call whitewood. They're completed structurally, but they have no finish, no color, no lacquer. The new part of the building of the factory basically takes the guitar from there. It gets colored, it gets scraped, it gets antiqued, it gets lacquered, it goes in, it gets buffed, it gets ridged, it gets set up, and shipping and warehousing. That's the new part. So we accomplished that. Now the new part of our factory has capacity for about 225 guitars a day. Now step two, we have to rebuild the old part of our factory to accommodate that capacity and be able to feed them enough guitars to get to that point. So that is where we're at right now. We're building the original factory. We removed things from the old space, like we did a new lunch area, we did a new machine shop, and we're utilizing that space to expand every other part of the back plant, from neck fit to sanding to binding, because we have to double pretty much every one of those stages in order to make this work to that upper capacity. So that's where we're at right now. We haven't really been able to maximize the new space yet, but that's phase 2 is in play as we speak. So. Anybody else? Any questions? Yes?
Is there a reason for this guitar here with the round peg in a square hole?
That is the Jerry Cantrell songwriter. That is an artist model for a famous heavy metal guitar player, and he that's what he wanted. So it's kind of funny. It's kind of like the black guitar next to it. This is, again, we do guitars, and we do kind of like, we like doing packages. So this is a Dave Mustaine, who's a famous heavy metal guitar player. Dave Mustaine acoustic model. We did a bunch of electric models for him, so we wanted to do an acoustic counterpart. And thus, the design just really isn't a traditional Gibson by any stretch of the imagination. He wanted a 24 fret neck, because that's what his electrics are. And even though it's a cutaway, you're really not going to go up there, but that's what he wanted. We didn't realize that it was going to actually take a ton of engineering, because we had to rearrange the whole top in order to accommodate that longer fingerboard. And then the one thing we didn't think about, the sound hole is smaller. Makes it really, most guys that work in the factory can't get their hands in there to install the electronics. So only certain people can fit their hands inside this guitar to do that. So there's always those things you don't think about when you're designing new guitars. But for those of you that are familiar with, there's a female guitarist, incredible electric guitarist named Orianthi.
Yeah.
She was on the, if anyone saw the Michael Jackson This Is It video, she was the blonde that was playing electric for Michael Jackson before his demise, and she was going to be on tour with him. But she came to Bozeman and helped Robbie Johns, our senior product development manager, and herself design the Orianthi J200. So really just at the same as a 200, but just the cosmetics, the lotus flowers, the coloration, her logo. Really, really unique instrument. They sound great, they play great, and she's just doing a great job for us promoting this specific guitar, and it's just beautiful. We have like 500 of these on order right now. It's crazy. So we have fun working with artists, creating new models. You know, we do get asked to do a lot of things that are outside the box of what we do. We're not going to disrupt production to build a guitar. We do custom builds, one-offs, made what we call made to measures within parameters. Like if you want that guitar but you want those inlays and those tuners and that color, that's easy. If you want the double neck acoustic, we're probably going to say no, just because it's not worth, you know, losing 20 guitars to build one guitar. And so I mean, but that is something, if you ever are in the market for a Gibson acoustic and there's really nothing that really bites you, but you can see, visualize a combination of things, talk to Mike, talk to any Gibson retailer, and they will call me. That's what I do. And we love building the guitars of your dreams, the guitars that you've always wanted, and we'll do anything we can to accommodate. Yes?
What's the lead time on something like that?
A year. That's where we're at right now anyway. So I always estimate a year and say, you know, just, and a lot of that depends on what it is. You know, if it takes engineering work and time to recreate new things which you're trying to stay away from, could be longer. If it's just a matter of I want a J200 but I want it black with dots instead of crowns on the fingerboard, that's easy. So some of those can be done quicker. Any other questions today? You know, I really, really appreciate everyone taking the time to come out. Our team appreciates it in Montana and Nashville, and we love the fact that you took the time to let us share with you the passion that our builders have for what they do and what they're doing. The guitars we're building right now, again, are the best guitars we've ever made, and if you have the chance to play some of these, I think you will heartily agree with me, because they're just wonderful.
So neck radiuses are all same?
No, our traditional fingerboard radius is 12 inches. Let's talk about the curvature this way. Our traditional fingerboard radius is 12 inches. On some of our modern guitars, because electric players like a flatter radius, younger players sometimes like to transition from electric to acoustic. So on our studio models and some of our other modern guitars, we went to a 16-inch radius, which is a little flatter, easier to bend strings, just makes that transition from electric to acoustic a little easier.
Ever talk about compound radius?
We did one model with a compound radius, and we had to create all new tooling to do it, and no one cared. Seriously.
Right. Yeah,
It did not drive that model to more sales, so we stepped away from it.
It's just a technical question.
Yeah, no. One thing that we fight all the time is anytime we do something different, every time we do something not historic, we just get the shit kicked out of us by the guys on the forums, the historic guys. It's really hard for us, for Martin, for other historic companies sometimes to step outside the box.
Nobody wanted a water cool Porsche 911.
Yeah, exactly. You know, but it's it's just one of those things where if it's not broken, don't fix it. And when you can't build enough guitars to satisfy people without re-engineering the wheel, there's no reason to do it. So I appreciate the question.
Y'all have a Gibson rep too on the gear page, which I thought was pretty cool. Matt, I think is his name, and he's in a forum and he answers all the questions.
That's great. That's great.
And so, cause yeah, without him, you guys can get bashed pretty good.
Well,
But it's nice for you guys to have a presence there, cause a lot of people ask questions like, is it torrefied back and sides and
Yeah.
things like that.
no, it's, you know, we do our best to listen, you know, to take people's questions and comments seriously, but again, it's something that a lot of people don't realize. The reason we don't do something is we already tried it and it didn't work, and so you just got to remind them of that and let them know. Even builders come up with great ideas. They think we could do this, it'd be easier. We have to explain to them, well, we did that 10 years ago, and this is why it didn't work. We appreciate you wanting to be helpful and coming up with an idea, but you know, sometimes they're disappointed, but a lot of times they take it with a grain of salt and realize that that's just they weren't there. They didn't know. So.
Will y'all ever have a Nick Lucas in the Murphy line?
I love before I leave Gibson, I'm going to build a Nick Lucas for myself.
13 fret, hopefully.
Yeah, the Bob Dylan model. Yep.
Yeah, because they're so cost prohibitive.
We've done a few. There was a store out in Connecticut whose owners were huge Bob Dylan fans, and they had us make them some 13 fret. Bob Dylan's famous for a picture of himself playing. A Nick Lucas is an LOO, deeper body. We did them in rosewood, we did them in maple, we did them in walnut. But it's not a really common Gibson, but it's a wonderful little parlor guitar.
Really expensive.
Yeah, to get one, yeah. But his was famous because it had a 13 fret neck joint, so it wasn't either a 12 or a 14. And we've built a few of them over the years, but it's not big enough demand right now to recreate that at this point.
Any kind of Nick Lucas model, you mean? For the,
I hope so.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just again right now when your year's backed up, it's hard to sometimes reinvent the tooling that would take to do that.
can you order one in the made to measure?
I would say yes, not a 13 fret.
No.
Yeah, we could
I'd
do.
probably do a 12.
We could do talk to Mike, talk to
Okay.
any. I'd love you to talk to Mike, but if you live in a different area and work with a different
No, I'll
retailer,
talk to Mike about it.
so yeah, he will call me up and I'll give him a quote. So, and a lot of times it's parts. One thing we do not do, and you can understand why, with as busy as we are, we don't order parts for a one-off. Because you have to create the parts in the system, they have to be costed out, they have to be built in the bill of materials for the build. It's very convoluted. It's easy to take dots and put them on a 200 because all those parts are already there and in the system. So if you do a Nick Lucas with the what we call the Lucky Charms inlays, I would just have to check and make sure you have those in stock and that kind of thing. So,
Okay, thanks.
yep. Again, thank you guys. I'm here. If you have any questions and you're too shy, just to speak up now. I'm here to, and please come up, check out the guitars, have some fun. I'd like to thank the Fuller's team for having us here today. And thank you guys. Appreciate everything.
Thank you.